How what's up, y'all? It's Poppin' was cracking this D. About to react to this vid by True Crime Design. It's titled "Why Dee Dee Blanchard Isn't the Monster You Think She Is." I already had my suspicions about Gypsy. I have vocalized these suspicions, but people were just so Gypsy gang, and they didn't want to hear it. So there's that. But whatever. Let's hear what they have to say though about her mom. Let's watch it.
This is a case that we haven't dealt with, and it's because it's so unusual. I mean, it really is an unusual case. What we thought initially may be a victim turns out to be a suspect. Things are not always as they appear.
Friends called police yesterday when they spotted this post on the Facebook page Dee Dee Blanchard shared with her 19-year-old daughter, Gypsy Rose. Investigators say they found the mother violently murdered inside their home and Gypsy gone.
The sheriff isn't saying how she died, but has said her death was violent. Investigators continued searching for her daughter, 19-year-old Gypsy, through the night.
The stuff you see in the news is horrible and not true. You know that I love my mama, and you know that I would never hurt her.
Dee Dee did seem terrible though. I didn't say that.
Was she?
No, I didn't say that. I just said Gypsy was shady, but the mama did seem terrible. But I don't know all the details.
Very protective.
Do you think she protected you?
No, not in certain ways, yes, in other ways, no. I think that she was very sick in her mind.
That what Dee Dee did to Gypsy was one of the most egregious forms of parental abuse you can imagine.
Because her mama was an insane, compulsive liar.
A lot of this information came to me by either Mike, my attorney, or Christy. My two attorneys are telling me that my mother has something called Munchausen by proxy, and she was using me for money and abusing me medically, and then to tell me all of the lies and manipulation on top of it. So I felt, did I ever know her at all?
Gypsy's mom was abusing her physically, medically, giving her medication she didn't need, having her go through procedures that she didn't need, to the point where most of Gypsy's teeth are not even hers because of the medication that her mom was giving her that she had no condition for.
The day that her mom died, Dee Dee was in the house somewhere, and Dee Dee was starving her. Like Dee Dee wasn't giving her anything to eat. I asked her sister, I was like, hey, to ask this, but you think Dee Dee had anything to do with her mom's death? And she, said, now I wonder.
Hey, Dee.
Her face creeps me out though, Kayla. Something sinister about it.
Hi, my name is Dee. We're about to leave to go out. Me and today, we're gonna go do some tricks.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard's moral and legal defense to justify her role as the mastermind of her mother's murder is based on her testimony that her mother tortured, abused, and isolated her for decades because of a rare psychiatric condition called Munchausen by proxy. Despite the fact that Dee Dee was never diagnosed, and frankly she does not meet the diagnostic criteria for this condition. Factitious disorder, formerly referred to as Munchausen syndrome, is categorized by the intentional falsification of physical and/or mental signs and symptoms in oneself or in another individual for no obvious external gain or reward. The diagnosis for an individual falsifying illness of another person, like in this case, is factitious disorder imposed on another. People with factitious disorders intentionally produce or exaggerate symptoms, but can't control their behavior. The primary motive is to assume the sick role, not for personal gain, but due to a psychological need to be perceived as ill or injured. The DSM-5 uses this criteria to diagnose factitious disorder imposed on another. I will say, in the case of Dee Dee Blanchard, she undoubtedly meets the first two criteria in that she, according to the evidence of record, falsified psychological and physical symptoms, as well as two diseases, muscular dystrophy and leukemia, which Gypsy never had or received treatment for. She also presented Gypsy as ill, impaired, and injured by shaving her head, making her use the wheelchair, and presenting her as childlike and mentally disabled. However, the analysis fails when it comes to the third and fourth points, that the deceptive behavior is evident even in the absence of obvious external rewards, and that the behavior is not better explained by another mental disorder. While I believe that Dee Dee did enjoy the attention of having an ill child, it's clear to me that the primary motivation was for personal gain.
Yeah, the money.
This is supported by Gypsy's testimony at
that makes it worse, then that
trial.
just means
Did
she's
you and your
evil.
mother obtain any kind of advantage by you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
What kind of advantage did you obtain?
Financial, attention, charity.
Financially, money.
Yes, sir.
Did you obtain money as a result of you being in a wheelchair?
Yes, sir.
I asked you why you obtained an advantage for being in a wheelchair. You said people gave you money, and I think my next question is, why did they give you money?
Because they felt sorry for me. They believed the lie. They believed the fraud.
Well, there you have it, folks. This is not a case of MBP or factitious disorder imposed on another. Recall that people with factitious disorder feign illness or injury not to achieve a clear benefit, such as financial gain, but rather to assume the sick role to gain sympathy and special attention, often given to people who are truly ill. On the other hand, malingering is characterized by the intentional falsification of symptoms with a clear objective in mind, like personal or financial gain. Unlike FD, malingering isn't considered a mental health condition because the malingerer has control over their actions and is driven by external incentives. While both involve the fabrication of symptoms, the key difference between factitious disorder and malingering lies in the motivation behind these actions. In fact, the DSM-5 specifically states that the diagnosis of factitious disorder requires the absence of obvious reward.
I feel like she's really hammering in this point, but okay, how does that not make her a monster? Get to that part.
Financial, attention, charity.
And while malingering is not a mental health condition, it can be associated with certain psychiatric disorders such as antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, dissociative disorders, and substance use disorders. Deceitfulness, lack of remorse, reckless disregard for safety of self and others, repeated failure to sustain constant work are common features of FD and antisocial personality disorder. As such, the diagnostic criteria here is not met. This is simply not a case of factitious disorder
girl,
or
we
Munchausen
believe
by
you.
proxy, according to the DSM-5.
Okay.
Despite this, Dee Dee Blanchard basically became the symbol for Munchausen by
I disagree with that.
But that abuse has nothing to do with Dee Dee's murder, according to prosecutor Dan Patterson, who just a little less than a month from Nicholas Godejohn's first day on trial, argued the character of Dee Dee Blanchard should be withheld from the jury. He says even if Gypsy's mother was abusive, her aggression wasn't being shown at the time of her stabbing,
That
and her
sounds
character
fed
played
up.
no
I didn't do
role in
that.
that night's violence.
Yeah, I didn't do
It's interesting that the prosecutor would argue that Dee Dee's character and the alleged abuse played no role in that night's violence, then turn around and use those same circumstances as mitigating factors in charging Gypsy Blanchard with second-degree murder instead of first-degree, like her co-defendant.
Gypsy Blanchard endured nearly 2 decades of systematic, purposeful abuse at the hands of her mother for the purpose of fraud. And so by amending to murder in the second degree, we were able to both hold Gypsy Blanchard accountable for the murder, which was not justified nor excusable, but yet account for those mitigating circumstances.
Those mitigating circumstances, if they are to be heard, are relevant at sentencing, not when deciding to charge with first or second degree murder, when the evidence is overwhelming and by the prosecution's own admission, they could have secured a first degree murder conviction for Gypsy. The same abuse that the prosecution says was not relevant to Dee Dee's murder at Nick's trial is the reason that Gypsy was offered a sweetheart plea deal, amending the charge to second degree and getting the lower half of the 10 to 30 year sentence for that charge.
All of us involved it's relief. At the very beginning of this, there was the question of the death penalty on the table. Ultimately, it's the best outcome for her. It's the best outcome for the state of Missouri, and ultimately the right thing to do for everybody.
Gypsy, her family, and her legal team successfully perpetuated this narrative through countless documentaries, TV programs, and interviews, gaining public support by way of sympathy for the sickly and childlike Gypsy Rose, who, in reality, was a 23-year-old woman who not only acted as a willing accomplice in her mother's fraud scheme, but meticulously masterminded the infamous murder and set up her co-defendant to take the fall for her evil deeds.
Who initially brought up killing your mother?
I did.
What other alternatives had you considered?
Poison, arson, a gun.
Why did you not consider poison?
It was too hard to find an odorless, tasteless poison.
Why didn't you kill?
I didn't believe I could do it.
Could you explain what you mean by that?
I don't like blood. I don't like the sight of blood. Frankly, I'm too squeamish. So I just honestly didn't believe I could do it on my own. I supplied the knife.
Where did you get it?
I stole it from Walmart.
Where did you get the bugs?
I supplied them.
Who paid for that trip?
I did.
Why did you pay for that trip?
Again, I didn't think he had enough money.
And how did you get money to him to come down on that trip?
I stole money from my mother, and I sent it to him via the mail.
How did they know when to do this one? The timelines that money.
I told him.
Who planned this murder?
I did.
Who talked you into killing your mother?
I did. I talked him into it.
I don't want to have to remind people every single time that I'm not the one that committed the act of the kill. So, I'm a part of it.
Right.
But in the state of Missouri, there's no such thing as accessory to murder. So technically, they couldn't charge me with accessory because that charge doesn't exist. So, had I been in another state, I would have been charged with accessory to commit murder.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
That is wild.
This narrative served to vilify the real victim and alibi Gypsy for her part in not only the murder, but also the financial fraud scheme.
I think to some degree I knew it was a facade. However, I didn't know the malicious intent behind the facade.
The Blanchards began working with HBO on Mommy Dead and Dearest before Gypsy's plea deal in July of 2016. The documentary debuted in May of 2017, after her plea agreement, but before Nick's trial in November 2018. It is my and many others' belief that this sensationalized piece precluded Nick's ability to have a fair trial, with the public and the prosecution pretty much concluding that he was the main player in this whole thing. So when it comes to the character of the victim and unsubstantiated abuse allegations raised by the perpetrator, facts seem to only matter when they favor the narrative that serves Gypsy and reassigns responsibility to both her victim and her co-defendant. Nonetheless, these claims of abuse were never properly investigated, challenged, or adjudicated. Dee Dee Blanchard was never charged with child abuse or any maltreatment towards Gypsy. She was publicly defamed and demonized without proof. As the prosecutor argued in Nick's pretrial hearing, even if Dee Dee was abusing Gypsy, that doesn't change the circumstances, that this was cold, calculated murder in the first degree under Missouri law. Plenty of defendants can point to unfortunate or unfair circumstances in their upbringing. It doesn't change the facts of the crime.
Right.
Even so, it's worth asking the question, was Gypsy ever actually medically abused or even treated poorly by Dee Dee? Now, most people who watch the documentaries would argue that of course she was abused, pointing to the long list of medications, procedures, and even coercing her child to lie in order to keep up the con. They would argue that the medicine closet, the surgeries, the feeding tube, the bizarre mother-daughter dynamic is enough to declare Gypsy as an abuse victim. And I won't deny that Gypsy was certainly groomed to lie, cheat, and steal by her mother, who was by no means a perfect angel. I speculate that Gypsy was predisposed to antisocial behavior, both by way of genetics and her inappropriate upbringing. But here's where the work of a woman that goes by the name of Fancy Mazzelli becomes critical in the analysis of this case.
Hey guys, it's Fancy, and you're watching the Good Wives Network.
Hey guys, it's Fancy, and you're watching the Good Wives Network.
Hey guys, it's Fancy, and you're watching the Good Wives Network.
Fancy and her team at the Good Wives Network were provided Gypsy's medical records by the family in a deal whereby Fancy was to produce a documentary telling Gypsy's story many years ago. However, the project fell through when, after years of reviewing the records and researching the facts, Fancy and her team made a discovery within the records that cracks the case wide open, exonerating Dee Dee's character and exposing what appears to be the true motive for the crime. By reviewing the medical records, Fancy would learn that Gypsy was born with a rare chromosome disorder. Chromosome 1q to 1.1 microdeletion syndrome, a rare chromosome abnormality that develops when there is missing genetic material on chromosome 1. The effect of this genetic variation ranges from being barely perceptible to being obvious and severe. Phenotypes of a 1q to 1.1 microdeletion are neurological psychiatric problems, microcephaly or small head, epilepsy, facial dimorphism, loose joints,
But
low
did it
muscle
require all
tone,
those
cataracts,
medications?
and other
I
eye
don't know about that.
problems. Again, this diagnosis is found within the medical records and even corroborated by Rod Blanchard, Gypsy's father.
Dee Dee told me she would need a wheelchair. And I asked her, man, she's got a lot of issues. What's going on, and they had done some tests and found out she had a chromosome disorder that was causing all of her functions from developing, her digestive system and her muscular system.
But she definitely was in wheelchair bound. She needs that.
I nicknamed her Possum, because she looked like little possum. Little bitty possum eyes.
Dee Dee started telling me that she's got some problems with her eyes, seizures,
her digestive system. After that, Gypsy couldn't walk anymore. She had a muscular disorder.
Dee Dee started telling me they're running tests, they're trying to find out what's going on with her. She's got a lot of issues.
In 2000, they ruled out muscular dystrophy because they were doing testing to try to find out the chromosome disorder that they knew she had when she was born. They knew she had one, and muscular dystrophy is one that would have explained some of her problems, but in 2000, they ruled that out. When they did the muscle biopsy and the nerve conduction. She does have eye problems. She did have ear problems. She did have feeding tube problems, feeding problems, failure to thrive. She was diagnosed with a muscular problem. They didn't figure it out until 2011 when they ran a very specialized genetic testing to try and figure out what all these erroneous little things that she had, because they didn't really fit into any one major thing. In September, I believe, of 2011, they returned for a follow-up visit, and that is when the chromosome disorder is proven, and they also state that Dee Dee does not carry it, and Rod could not be tested. And she does have this microdeletion, and it explains her entire medical history, both the physical medical history and her mental health medical history. It's all explained inside of this chromosome disorder. This microdeletion, it explains her eye problems, her ear problems, her teeth problems. It explains the weak muscle tone she has. It explains all the different things. It explains why the feeding tube was placed. It explains why there was a muscle biopsy done to rule out muscular dystrophy. And it 100% proves that muscular dystrophy and cancer, later in 2007, cancer hit the scene, was used for financial gain. That's it. That's the whole case. Financial gain. Medical fraud for financial gain.
Dee Dee and Gypsy were malingering when it comes to cancer and muscular dystrophy, but that doesn't mean that Gypsy did not have very real medical challenges that Dee Dee did her best to diagnose and treat for. And thanks to Fancy, we know that these conditions stem from her congenital chromosome disorder.
The only thing that I have wrong with me is I have a little bit of a lazy eye. Not all the time, but I have better vision in this eye than I do that eye. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. And I'm completely healthy. Like, I have no health problems whatsoever.
So the fact that they're denying this chromosome disorder is very interesting, because what does it do? It blows their lives apart. That's what it does. And that's why they don't want you to know about it. Christy, and that little girl up there, that grown-ass woman up there, used all this nonsense to cover up a murder, to villainize the victim, to ensure that her co-conspirator would go down for it all, and she'd come out of prison, doing a quick little stint of 8 years, and be a millionaire. All for unaliving her mom for that fire D. Because it sure as shit was not about Munchausen by proxy or medical child abuse. Honey, you can spin this any way you want, but it is very evident that you do in fact have a 2.74 MB microdeletion of chromosome 1Q to 1.1. And no, love, you do not fall into the 75% of people that have that have no symptoms. It's very clear that you have symptoms.
Interesting.
Dee Dee had a lot of trouble asking for help, but they were actually given quite a bit of stuff, like trips to Disney World, Disneyland. They got the Habitat for Humanity house and the furniture in it and all that.
And here's the key to the car that was donated.
It was very important to Dee Dee for Gypsy to have a very fulfilled life before she passed.
Dee Dee Blanchard was not without her flaws. According to surviving family members, she had a history of cashing bad checks and stealing money from family. She deceived good people and stole from children in need. It was wrong to fabricate fatal illnesses in her daughter, and many people were truly devastated when they realized they had been duped by the conning duo. Dee Dee Blanchard was a con woman, but she wasn't a child abuser. It's clear that her life revolved around Gypsy and making sure she wanted for nothing. It must have been difficult for Dee Dee as a single mother with a medically complex child. Many folks who knew the pair had only glowing things to say about Dee Dee, specifically speaking to her positivity, generosity, and unmatched dedication to her daughter. This case is unique because I can't think of another case where we take the narrative of the perpetrator as fact without evidence and even considering the victim's perspective. Gypsy masterfully reversed the victim-offender roles in the public eye and continues to cash in on her notoriety that was built entirely on lies.
Sheesh.
But as Gypsy's public behavior continues to draw attention, more folks are digging into the crime and uncovering truths that paint the whole tragedy from a completely different perspective.
Saying she doesn't identify as a murderer, knowing she used this man
to murder
that is autistic with a low IQ and other mental health issues to unalive her mom because she wanted to get some DICK.
And it just seems so convenient.
And to villainize her and him.
Yeah.
So all she does is every person in her life, she villainizes them.
Yeah.
And manipulates the people around after she villainizes these people.
And then she discards
This is her game.
She discards you when she can't use you anymore.
This is her game. And to know that she had her mom unalived for her own selfish reasons when this woman was never abusing her is
wow.
Mind blowing.
It's
like all I can say is rest in peace, Dee Dee, because it truly is a sad situation.
To quote Greene County Sheriff Jim Arnott, things are not always as they appear. Thank you for watching.
Very interesting. So there's not much proof that she physically abused Gypsy, because that was definitely a part of the narrative, is that, you know, she was medically abusing her and physically abusing her, and she was this terrible person to Gypsy. But, you know, if we were just going based on Gypsy's word this whole time, that's crazy. There isn't any physical evidence. And I didn't know she had any illness at all. I thought that she was perfectly healthy, and Dee Dee just fabricated all of this. But to see that there was actually a disease present, and they were actually treating the disease or the disorder, or whatever the case, with some of the medications she was taking, that's very interesting. That's new information. I didn't know that. And I guess their whole point is that Dee Dee was just trying to get money. She was trying to create this image that Gypsy had all these issues so that she can get money, but she wasn't actually trying to harm her. But I don't know. I haven't watched the documentary in a long time, so I don't remember the exact details, but I do wonder if some of the medications would have, you know, harmed her over the long term, you know? If not all of them were dedicated to her actual illness, you know? So I don't know. I need more details about that specifically, because that's a little sus. But yeah, I've always said Gypsy was sus, all right? I've never trusted her. So there's that. The truth might be somewhere in the middle, but I don't know. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Let me know what other videos you want to watch, and I'll see y'all the next time. Bye!